friends. This is the QuickByte Podcast.
Welcome to the QuickByte Podcast. I'm your host, Brian Klinger. Today I have a special guest, Danny Klein, the Vice President, Editorial Director, Food, Retail, and Hospitality with QSR and FSR magazines. Danny, it's good to see you.
Always good to see you, Brian. Glad to be here.
Yeah, it's great to connect with you. I'm always a fan of the shows. I love the QSR Evolution. Shameless plug for QSR Evolution Conference. I think it's one of the best shows in the industry. If you haven't sponsored it, haven't attended, you're missing out. Make sure you check it out. All right, Danny, you know the rules. We got 10 questions. We're going to go through them quick. Here we go. Question number 1. What is the best piece of business advice you've ever received?
My very first editor told me to treat every story that I was writing like the World Series. At the time, I was a sports writer, so that analogy made more sense. But it was actually in relation to a fishing tournament that I was covering as my very first assignment. So as somebody from New York City, I knew nothing about fishing, had no idea how to make it interesting. And I asked him, how do I do that? And that was his advice. So I actually, and I tell young people that, and I do that with every single article that I write, and just try to make sure that the person who's on the other side knows that you care as much as you can.
Man, that's amazing. What are the top 3 leadership qualities that you think a great leader should have?
Yeah, I think it's very important to be responsive. That's one of the free skills in the world. I think somebody who is hard to reach is a very difficult person to work with and a very difficult person to learn from. I also think you need to lead by example, but not in a way that you're not willing to take people along with you. In other words, show them how you do it, be willing to be that person, but, don't do it in a way where they feel like they can never live up to the bar that you're setting. And the third leadership, I would just say, this is very cliche, but to be empathetic, I think is a very critical trait in people. I've worked for a lot of people in my life who you just never knew where you stood with them. And it's really not a very difficult thing to do as a leader, to just show that you're curious about their life or their circumstances, or maybe why they missed deadline, or what's kind of driving them, and just asking some of those personal questions, I think goes a really long way.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think just treating people as people, and really showing that care goes a long way. So how does one become a leader? How does one aspire? Let's say they're a frontline worker. I'm of the belief anyone can lead, right? At any role you're in. But how does one aspire to leadership in your opinion?
I think that there's something to be said about outlasting the people. And that may not always sound like it's a compliment, but I actually think it really is, because you always get at points in your career where you think like, okay, I'll go jump off right now. It's not great. I'm frustrated by this person I work with or the circumstance, or I don't see the next tier in the ladder, and you end up leaving, and you kind of reset the bar every time. But there's something to be said in my experience of sticking things out and finding a way to be better at the job you are. And then you just kind of suddenly find yourself, like I did 6-7 years into your career, being put in a leadership position without having ever asked for it. And what's nice about that versus kind of, jumping ship and taking on a new leadership role is you figure out, kind of like I said before, you've done all the things that you're asking of people who you're hiring and who are under you. So I recommend that to a lot of people sometimes, is just don't always look to your next job. You might not think when you get into it. My first job, my boss asked me to be there 2 years. I was there for almost 7 years, which had its goods and minuses, but I ended up being in a leadership position at the end. So I think sometimes that's how you get there, simply by being the type of person who shows they're not going to jump ship when it gets difficult.
And what role does faith play in your business life?
Yeah. So, for me, the way that I look at that is that I've always had, I'm not the most confident person on earth, working on that. And, I have a little bit of a self-deprecating nature to my personality, but also just, whatever you might want to call it, if it's imposter or what, and just comes from my life, I guess. But there have been other people who believe in me way more than I believe in me. And so I've always been kind of driven by their faith in me getting to somewhere, that I kind of have this, I think it's a healthy fear of failure. But it's less so a fear of failure as it is just not living up to the expectation that they set for me. So even going back to, college, I got into a school and program I didn't think I could. And my dad wanted me to be a sports writer. So a lot of the hard work and the studying and this type of things was really driven by, I just didn't want to go and tell him I didn't try,
Right.
And that's been true a lot in my work life too. I've had bosses who put me into a digital role that I didn't pick for myself. And I kind of have this need to make sure I live up to the faith and expectation of people who are more confident in myself than I am.
Yeah, that's a great word, Danny. I think that a lot of people can take encouragement as leaders to ensure that the words we speak into our employees and the people around us are uplifting, because you're evidence of the power of someone having belief in you and how it's led to your achievements in life.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think sometimes, you want to make sure that you are telling the people that work for you that you think they can do something that they don't quite. I mean, right now we have our editor of our FSR magazine. We had circumstances with somebody leaving that I probably put her in that position before she ever thought she would take it. And I really had to explain to her, this is where I see you going. Maybe you're not there yet, but, we will get there. And she's really blossomed in that role. And I think there's the other side of that. I think sometimes you show faith in people who don't reward it. That's just the reality of things too. As a leader, you have to understand that happens at times, but you can never see the alternative if you don't start by telling somebody you think they can get there.
That's a great word. Hey, I got a question for you around people that have impacted you professionally. Who would you say has had the biggest impact on you?
Ooh, it's funny. I mean, my and kind of going back to my first boss, I would put this in two people. It's like 2.5 people. Okay, it's 3 people. We'll give them 3 because I don't want to leave any of these 3 people out. My very first editor, he was flawed in many, many ways. I mean, I kind of look back on it, and he was kind of like the age I was when I started here, and he seemed old to me at that time. But he was the type of person. I remember one day we were working at like 2 a.m, as you tend to do in a newspaper, and he was typing in local golf scores. So it's like the 80-year-old guy, who scored a 87 and like get their name in the paper. And I asked him, and I was like, why are you doing this? I'll do this. Like, I just started working here. And he's like, well, I don't, I make a lot more money than you. You're looking at me. I'm not going to just let you do this like while I go home. And that was a very extreme lesson, but one that he always abided by. And I really took to heart kind of going forward. Again, kind of not trying to ask somebody to do something that I wouldn't be willing to do. I hear a lot in leadership that you don't want to, be smarter than everybody in the room. And that's not what I'm suggesting. It's more just being willing to be everybody in the room. And that was who he was. And so that made a big impact on my life when I got to be a sports editor. And then when I got to be a leader 10 years after that, there's a little bit of a gap there. And then second would be Webb Howell, was the owner of QSR and Food News Media before, our current leadership company, transition. And he was really that empathetic leader that I was talking about before. Amazing person. You knew that. And I told him when when he retired or sold the company and moved on to the next venture in his life, that he was the only person that I ever worked for that I truly trusted. And that was true, because he was the type of person, from talking about your family or what you're doing outside of work, the kind of conversations you might have at the cubicle that weren't related, that you just knew he was invested in you as a person, and that really mattered to him.
Sure.
And I had not seen that in my life to that point, and I will always be grateful that he believed in me, to take on the role that I did at QSR. He put me in the editorial director position, and he's just meant a lot to me over the years. And then the other would be Greg Sanders, who was formerly our publisher. Now he works on our audience development side. He has really played that final role that I was talking about in terms of having more faith in me than I probably had in myself. He really led the charge to kind of give me a role about 7 years ago that I didn't have, and has always given me a lot of rein to make crazy decisions with our content and things that I do, that he just trusts me to make that call. So the 3 of them have really left a very, very lasting impact, professionally and just in my life as well.
Who is a company that you admire and why?
Oh, man.
I know you work with a lot of brands and talk to a lot of brands, and it could be something unrelated to the restaurant hospitality, and it could be something completely different. But who's a company you look at and think, man, they're doing it right?
Yeah, well, so, I work with a lot of restaurant companies, and I love a lot of them. I'm wearing a Chick-fil-A sweatshirt at the moment that you could see and hear, but yeah. So the thing I like about them, and I'll just kind of say like on an admiration level, is that you hear a lot about how they operate and who they are. And, especially like in my from my perspective of being a reporter and just dealing with them on that level. But then the thing for me though is when I got to actually know them a little bit, through our conference and some other things, they really are like the version of themselves that they portray. And that's a very, very rare trait in the world. I mean, forget just restaurants, but they're all very kind, generous people. The CEO is somebody who preaches the, people first leadership and culture, and they live that to every person that you talk to and deal with within that organization is the real deal. So I admire them on the structural level of what they've built. I always get asked the question of how are they so nice, or, their hospitality. And it's like, well, it's almost a culture that feeds itself at this point, because everyone who goes to work there understands the standard of who they're supposed to be. And that is such a impossible thing to replicate at scale. And I don't know that anyone else will ever quite do it. But everyone who I meet there comes to our conference. Chris Thomas is somebody I met recently who I've gotten to know at our events, and they're all just great people. I mean, they really are. And so beyond that, of course, the $22 billion in sales and and what you kind of just see on that, side, and what I see even my local owner operators and things. I think if you're trying to replicate something or mirror the way that an organization works, they are the apex of how that is.
Amen to that. I agree with everything you said. They've been a partner for a long time. And the Cathy family is the real deal. It's a real testament to Truett Cathy and the foundation that he laid as the founder. But now you're on generation 3, and you're seeing, Andrew take the mantle and really run with it. And actually caught up with Andrew one time at the one of your QSR Evolution conferences. Actually, it was the year that he was the keynote. And I asked him, I said, Andrew, how do you feel about being in, the leader, the head, the CEO now? He said, I just don't want to screw it up. And I just love that kind of humility that he had.
Yeah. And that's such a funny kind of story, because, when we were doing that event, he was the keynote at the inaugural QSR Evolution. And of course it helped that we put it in Atlanta, but it was a hard thing to get across to people in the early days, because I would reach out and I'd say, oh, we're doing this event. Well, you don't do an event. You haven't done one in 20 years or whatever. What is this conference? What's it about? What's the mission statement? I'd have to answer all these questions over and over and over again and it was starting to kind of drive me crazy. And when I brought that idea to Chick-fil-A about doing the keynote and, he said yes, which I did not expect. I never answered that question again.
That's amazing.
So for that level, I mean, I was just very thankful that they agreed to let us kind of provide that platform and to partner with us on it, because they believed in us to be able to throw a conference that would be, fitting of what they wanted to do. Because he doesn't speak a lot. And I remember feeling a lot of pressure just to make sure, that people showed up and that it was kind of what we said it was going to be. But I would have never been able to do that in year one without their backing of what we were doing. And that's true of every brand. I mean, we had 161 speakers that year, and 159 of them showed up. And that is something that no matter what I do or where I go in life, I will always be thankful for. And it kind of started with them, to be honest. So,
and Danny, what impressed me was after Andrew Cathy spoke, you saw the pictures that were taken, and a lot of people come up and meet with him after off the stage, and people wanted to take photos with him. And I remember standing off to the side, observing the way that Andrew Cathy interacted with the folks in the room, and his handlers were telling him, sir, we have a meeting to get to. Do you remember this? And they were trying to pull him away. And Andrew stayed there till the last person that wanted to meet with him. And and that line probably lasted for an hour, I'm guessing.
It's that's a kind of a funny story too. A lot of funny stories here, but he, ahead of time, we were actually trying to figure out a way to get him out quickly. We had looked into was there a way to go out the back of the stage, get off the stage and go out the back? And there wasn't, by the way, but we had a plan to not have that happen. But I think he enjoyed the experience so much and kind of the reaction of that he got from people in the conversations that he just decided kind of he threw a curveball there and then didn't leave right away. And yeah, and that ended up being true. If you look at, all the Inspire brands too, that's another one in terms of their partnership has made that conference what it is. And they, were there in year 1, they were there in year 2. They will be there in year 3. Yeah. And I love working with them. But they kind of, they did the same thing. They stuck around. The Subway guys stuck around. And so, and first watch as well. And I don't know that going in, a lot of those guys knew what to expect, if they were going to do that. And I think you saw that hospitality feeling of like collective progress and wanting to actually give back. And so that ended up kind of really setting the stage for what we're trying to do. And again, yeah, that was kind of amazing to watch that.
Yeah, and that was really cool to watch you get one of the Dunk Kings outfits from the Super Bowl that Ben Affleck, had worn, and proud member of that as well. Because we do a lot of advocacy for them. Inspire Brands, amazing organization, as you said, great people. Atlanta's truly blessed with a lot of great restaurant companies there. I want to move on to another question for you. What's a fun fact about you, Danny, that a lot of people don't know? Lay something out that's breaking news. Let us in on who Danny Klein is when he's not the public persona.
Oh God. I'm honestly not that interesting. I have a 2 and a 5-year-old. So much of I only have 2 sides to myself at the moment, and I'm okay with that. I was recently at a conference where they were telling fortunes at a table, which was kind of fun, they were silly, but, the fortune teller was like, you don't seem to be enjoying parenthood as much as you thought. And I was like, well, I don't know where you got that from, because I'm enjoying it just as much and just as little as I expected to. It has its amazing highs and lows, and that is entirely what I signed up for.
Danny, I think so. Yeah. I was going to say, not to interrupt you, but I think the worst kept secret is that you're actually a really talented stand-up comedian. I mean, before the shows, the conferences, I had no idea that you would be as funny as you are. I think you're actually one of the highlights of the event, just with some of the deadpan comedic opportunities that you take advantage of. And I don't even know if that's intentional. I think it's just who you are.
Well, yeah, I mean, I talked a lot about this at the time, but I didn't know any of that either. Because I had not been, because again, we didn't do conferences. So I had moderated some panels at other events at times of my life, but maybe 2 of them. And I had never done anything like stand up there and talk. So I didn't know what I was doing, and that's just ended up evolving into kind of how I speak. And I think I wrote this at the time, like it ended up kind of sounding like my dad, who passed away a few years ago, and he was that way, where he would just be like, he'd talk and he'd sit there and be like, what did he say? Was that like meant to be funny? But he was just someone that a lot of people really liked, because he was very genuine and authentically himself, whether or not you liked it or not. And that I've found to kind of be how this is. Not everyone, because some people are like, well, what is he doing up there? Like, his style is not polished. He doesn't talk like a general moderator or keynote speaker. And that's just how I'm going to be. And if, people, the thing I found about being authentic is you end up getting the right type of support. People will either back you or be in your corner, because at least that's who you are. Versus kind of having like this army of, fake support. And so I'm going to be who I am. I don't really know anything else. And that's how I am in real life too. I'm more of like a close circle type of person versus having a million friends. And that's just how I am. Very, very loyal to a fault, maybe too much so sometimes. Of course, we have our Women in Leadership event coming up here in February as a shameless plug. But I think if you look at the way that that's developed, I think you see the authenticity of how our organization works and the people that we hire and how we view things, because that group of people, I often get asked, how do I get on the board, or how do I get, and it's like, it all started because people asked me. Yeah. And I knew you, or I worked with you, and this is where this relationship began. And that's how it's developed, is that this is a group of people who support each other, support what we're doing. And that's just the type of people that we want to be associated with. And and it really is the type of thing that will give you life. So,
Agreed. Well, Danny, I think one of the things that you just said in that our audience would really, I think, should latch onto, if you were going to take a marker and underline it, it really is the value and the power of bringing your authentic self to the table. And there is power of authenticity. I really do think that's one of your endearing qualities that people do really enjoy about the conference, is that I don't think you're ever putting on a front. It is who you are. And that's what people love. And it's turned out to be some of the funnier moments. I was thinking about Andrew Cathy talking about the books he reads to his children. That just had me on the floor.
Yeah. And I've never asked him, like, what did he think about that? Because that just, I mean, that was when he was talking about, he was reading his kids' books about the P&L at night. And I had no idea if he was kidding. So we didn't script that. He wasn't kidding, to the best of my knowledge. He actually does do that, which is And I've met other people who do similar things. So that's, it's cool. And then I just made a joke about how I was reading my son this book about owls or whatever. And, what does that say about who he's going to be when he grows up?
Exactly. Danny, a couple more questions real quick for you. How much time do you get to dedicate to unwinding? I mean, you're a busy parent, you're running these magazines, but what do you like to do to unwind?
Yeah, I mean, I try really, really hard to, and I think business to business media really helps this. So you could the day ends and it's over. And you can go downstairs and be with your children. My son is obsessed with watching these terrible, YouTube dinosaur shows, and I just sit there with him. I might be on my phone or whatever, but that helps me unwind, and I try to play golf with one of my coworkers and friends. Charlie, it doesn't happen as often as I think either of us would want it to, but that's kind of like our, I have a lot of like dad activities that are starting in my life: golfing, grilling.
Yeah, those are some great moments too. You're ready for
bourbon, I'm becoming every like 30, 8-year-old dad.
Yeah. Well, your journey is, I know, in many ways just beginning in that world, and it is incredible. I'm on the other side of that. I've got one son that's already out. I've got another one going off to college next fall, and I'm about to be the empty nester. But there's nothing better. If I could go back in time and relive a lot of those moments, they're some of the most priceless to me. So enjoy every minute of it. Last question, Danny. What is your why? If you want people to know what makes Danny Klein tick, what is your why?
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to what I said earlier. Even now, this far into my career, I still am driven by needing to not fail. But I really think nowadays, I mean, my job is changing a lot. I care a lot about the people I've hired. I really want to see them be successful. But I think what's happened through the events and through our content, through LinkedIn, through a lot of different progressions in my professional career is I've really kind of tried to turn a lot of focus to the connective element of our industry. I've always wanted QSR to really be like a center of gravity for people. You read QSR because you obviously want to educate yourself and be entertained, but also because you think about who else is reading QSR. And so then for me, that puts a little bit of an onus on like, okay, if we have that very important role, like how do we serve as that sort of connective element between people to help them, in their businesses and also just kind of in their lives? I have a lot of connections now that have become people I'm pretty close with. We talk. We got a call the other day from the current CMO of Red Lobster who received her job through our World platform, just meeting somebody at our conference. And that kind of stuff means a lot to me. Really driven by trying to figure out a way to be great at that, because I do want to be able to make a lasting difference in people beyond just like reading the news or the content they might consume, because there's so many options for that. And how do you be that genuine person, and stay that way so that when people interact with you, they kind of know what they're getting into and they expect you. The other day, somebody ended up on our cover and I had been talking to him about this for years. And he just said something to me like, you said this was going to happen, but people tell me that all the time. And I'm like, I don't want to be that guy. But try to do what I say. Try to respect the people that we talk to. Like I said at the beginning with, everything is going to matter to me. I want to care about every story and continue to have that kind of passion. And again, for the young people that we hire and start to grow their careers, to just put them in a position to, really make their lives better and to enjoy what they do, because it's one of the worst feelings in the world to wake up and not want to go to work. And that's a responsibility on my shoulders now, and the people that work for me and that I employ. So it's a lot of different things. But it is definitely like there are these certain things I strive for and I do not want to fail at them. And so that's kind of what keeps getting me up. I'm not a personally ambitious human being. I'd be happy being here forever, to be honest, as long as all these things continue and I enjoy it. I'm not trying to get to ESPN or something. I never was that person. And so, yeah, and that's kind of it. I just want to be successful in what we're doing and to make an impact on the culture and employees within our organization and also the larger industry who spends time with us.
Well, Danny, thank you for sharing your time and your wisdom, your insights, your experiences with the QuickByte podcast. For those that aren't following Danny Klein, I encourage you to check him out on LinkedIn. Subscribe to QSR Magazine, FSR Magazine, attend the QSR Evolution Conference, the women's conference they host. Everything they do is first class. But Danny, you're remarkable. Thank you for everything you're doing for the industry. And it's been a pleasure to have you on today.
Yeah, and thank you, Brian, too, and for being a part of, supporting us from the very beginning with, being that content person at our conference and our hype man. So that's always meant a lot, too, because I think you were the first one to actually want to try to do that. So.
Well, it's my pleasure, and I think you're only getting better and better with time, and you came out of the gate swinging big, and I know that you've got many more years of success to come. So it's only going to get bigger, Danny. I'm confident in that.
Yeah, I hopefully not too big. It was pretty big last year.
Yeah, it was. But Danny, you're amazing. Thank you again for joining the QuickByte podcast, and we will see you next time.
All right, talk soon.
QuickByte Podcast is proud to shine a spotlight on Giving Kitchen, an incredible nonprofit serving the food service community in times of crisis. From unexpected medical emergencies to natural disasters, Giving Kitchen steps in when life takes an unexpected turn. To learn how you can help support those who serve us every day, visit givingkitchen.org. And while you're at it, subscribe to the QuickByte Podcast, where leadership meets heart, and join us in making a difference, one episode at a time. QuickByte Podcast. Bite-sized conversations, big-time impact.